The rain hammered down like God's own fury, turning the dirt road into a river of mud that swallowed Harold's truck whole. "You're nothing without me. You hear? A freak who'll die alone in this godforsaken storm." Carl's voice cracked over the thunder, his eyes wild with a mix of rage and regret as he shoved the door open and stumbled out into the night, leaving Harold clutching the steering wheel, heart shattering louder than the lightning splitting the sky. In that instant, as taillights faded into the black, Harold realized love wasn't a shelter. It was the storm itself, ripping everything bare. Harold Jenkins had always chased storms, ever since he was a kid growing up in the salt-crusted shitholes of coastal Maine. Not the literal ones, though those New England nor'easters had shaped him plenty. Fierce gales that bent the lobster buoys like pretzels and left the harbors looking like war zones. No, Harold chased the emotional tempests, the kind that twisted your guts and left you gasping for air. At 34, he was a lobsterman by trade, hauling traps before dawn in the icy Atlantic, his hands calloused from ropes that bit deeper than any lover's words. Broad-shouldered, with a jaw like carved granite and eyes the color of smoked oak, he turned heads in the dive bars of Rockland, but he kept his heart locked tighter than his bait shed. It started innocently enough, the way these things do in small towns where everyone knows your daddy's fishing accident and your mama's early grave. Carl Whitaker blew into town like a rogue wave 2 summers back, fresh off a stint in Boston's tech scene, running from some corporate ladder he swore had poisoned his soul. At 28, Carl was all sharp angles and city polish, lean runner's build, tousled blonde hair that caught the sun like fool's gold, and a smile that could disarm a harbor seal. He bought the old lighthouse keeper's cottage on the bluff overlooking Penobscot Bay, claiming he wanted to find himself through woodworking and waves. Harold spotted him first at the Friday night clambake down at the VFW Hall, Carl nursing a Pabst Blue Ribbon, looking like a lost Kennedy in flannel. "You ever wonder if the sea's just waiting to claim us all?" Carl had asked, his voice low and gravelly, cutting through the fiddle music and laughter like a knife through fog. Harold, 3 beers deep and fresh off a solo haul that had netted him a busted propeller, leaned against the railing beside him. The air smelled of charred clams and salt spray. Every damn day. But that's why we fight it, haul the lines, mend the nets. Ain't no claiming if you don't let go. Their eyes locked then, a spark jumping fiercer than any 4th of July sparkler. By midnight, they were tangled in the cab of Harold's Ford F-150, parked on a forgotten dirt lane where the ferns whispered secrets to the wind. Carl's hands were surprisingly rough for a desk jockey turned artisan, tracing the scars on Harold's back from a rogue hook years ago. "You're real," Carl murmured against his neck, breath hot and needy. "Not like those polished assholes back in the city." Harold pulled back just enough to search his face, the dashboard glow painting Carl's cheeks in blues and oranges. "And you're trouble. The kind that washes up and wrecks the shore." But Trouble was Harold's middle name, or so his exes back in high school had whispered before they ghosted him for safer shores, straight-laced girls or the closet cases who bolted at the first whisper of commitment. Maine wasn't San Francisco. Being gay here meant navigating currents as treacherous as the bay's riptides. You'd spot the signs in the quiet ones, the lingering glance at the gym, the extra pour at the bar, but outing yourself could cost you traps, friends, or worse, your family's legacy. Harold's dad had gone down with the Daphne in '98, leaving him the boat and a debt that still nipped at his heels. No room for storms on land. Yet Carl crashed through those walls like driftwood through a breakwater. Mornings after, they'd wake to the gulls' cries, coffee brewing on Carl's driftwood-strewn porch while he sketched designs for custom-cutting boards, walnut slabs etched with nautical motifs that sold like hotcakes at the farmer's market. Afternoons were for Harold's hauls, Carl tagging along in yellow oilskins, his laughter booming over the engine's rumble as they baited traps with herring guts. "This is living," Carl would say, wiping slime from his hands, his green eyes alight with a fire Harold hadn't seen since his own youth. Evenings blurred into nights of slow, aching intimacy, bodies mapping each other under threadbare quilts, whispers of futures that tasted like salt and promise. "You're my anchor," Harold confessed one August evening, as they lay spent on the lighthouse's widow's walk, the sun dipping blood-red into the sea. Carl's head rested on his chest, fingers tracing lazy circles over Harold's tattoo, a compass rose inked after his dad's funeral, pointing forever north. "And you're my North Star," Carl replied, voice thick with something unspoken. But even then, Harold felt the undercurrent, the subtle shift like a tide turning. Carl's phone buzzed more those days. Late-night calls from Boston numbers, terse voicemails about loose ends. Harold chalked it up to city ghosts, but the doubt seeded like barnacles on a hull. Fall crept in with its crisp edges, leaves turning the bluffs to fire. The first big blow hit mid-October, a nor'easter that rattled windows and canceled school. Harold was out mending lines in the shed when Carl's truck crunched up the drive, earlier than usual from his market stall. "We need to talk," Carl said, slamming the door, his face pale as cod belly. Harold straightened, wiping diesel from his hands on a rag. "Sounds like the kind of talk that needs whiskey." Inside, over tumblers of Maker's Mark, Carl spilled it like bilge water. His ex, some venture capitalist named Trent back in Boston, had shown up unannounced at the market that morning. Not just any ex, a golden boy with a trust fund and a penthouse, the one who'd convinced Carl he could go straight if he just tried harder. They'd hooked up the night before Carl left the city, a farewell fuck that Trent now spun as unfinished business. "He's offering me a way back," Carl said, staring into his glass. "A real job, stability. Says I'm wasting away here, playing house with you." The word hung, unspoken but sharp, fisherman. Redneck. Queer. Harold's chest tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "And what do you say?" Carl's eyes flicked up, tormented. "I say I'm scared shitless. It's everything I ran to. But Trent's promising a life without the whispers, the stares. No more hiding in plain sight." Harold set his glass down, the clink echoing like a gavel. "Hiding? That's what you think this is? I've been out since I was 17, Carl. Lost friends. Damn near lost my crew. But I chose truth over easy. You think love's a vacation spot you can pack up and leave when the weather turns?" Carl reached for his hand, but Harold pulled back. "It's not that simple. My folks, they're old-school Irish Catholic. If they knew, they know plenty," Harold cut in, voice rising like the wind outside. "Saw you two at the clam bake, arm in arm like it was nothing. But now it's convenient to forget." The argument escalated, words flying like spinnaker sheets in a gale, accusations of naivety, of clinging to small-town illusions, of betraying the raw honesty that had drawn them together. Carl stormed out into the gathering dusk, muttering about needing space. Harold let him go, slamming the door on the echo of his own heartbeat. That night, the storm broke full force. Warnings blared on the radio. Category 2. Winds gusting to 80 knots. Surges swallowing docks whole. Harold secured the boat at the marina, tarping the traps, then drove the winding bluff road to Carl's cottage, wipers slapping futilely against the deluge. The Ford fishtailed on the mudslick curve, but he pressed on, stubborn as the sea itself. He found Carl's truck abandoned at the trailhead to the old lighthouse path, keys in the ignition, engine still ticking cool. Panic clawed Harold's throat. The path was a suicide slope in this weather, rocky drops to the surf below, no railings, just sheer cliff and churning black water. "Carl!" Harold bellowed into the roar, flashlight beams slicing the sheets of rain. Nothing but the howl. He plunged down the trail, boots sliding on wet granite, heart pounding a war drum. Halfway, his light caught a flash. Carl's yellow jacket snagged on a jagged outcrop, torn and whipping like a distress flag. Below, through the spray, a shape thrashed in the foam. Carl, swept off the path by a wave crash, clinging to a barnacle-crusted boulder as the tide clawed at his legs. "Harold!" Carl's scream was a ragged thread, barely audible over the thunder. In that frozen second, rage and love collided like continents. The man who'd called him a freak hours ago, now the only handhold in the abyss. Harold didn't hesitate. He scrambled down, ignoring the sting of cuts on his palms, the world narrowing to that desperate grip. "Hold on. Damn it. I'm coming." The descent was a blur of instinct and adrenaline, each step a gamble against the cliff's betrayal. Harold's boots skidded on slick moss, sending pebbles skittering into the void where the sea gnashed its teeth. Salt spray stung his eyes, mixing with sweat and something hotter, tears he wouldn't admit to later. Carl's face, pale and etched with terror, was a beacon in the chaos, his fingers white-knuckled on the rock, body half-submerged as waves pummeled like prize-fighters. "Jump! I can't. It's pulling me under," Carl gasped, voice breaking as another swell hit, forcing a choke of seawater from his lungs. "Bullshit, you can't," Harold growled, voice steady despite the quake in his chest. He wedged his heels into a crevice, extending his arm like a lifeline. "Grab hold, you stubborn son of a bitch. We're not ending like this." Their hands met in a clash of desperation. Carl's slick with blood from the barnacles, Harold's raw from the scramble. The pull was immense, the ocean a living beast yanking at Carl's legs. But Harold dug in, muscles screaming from years of hauling 50-pound pots. Inch by brutal inch, he hauled, grunting curses that blended with the gale. A rogue wave crested then, slamming them both, but Harold held, his free hand finding purchase on a root snaking from the cliff face. Finally, with a heave that tore something in his shoulder, Carl collapsed against him on a narrow ledge, both gasping like beached cod. The rain eased to a relentless patter, thunder rumbling distant now, as if the storm itself had spent its wrath. They clung there, soaked to the bone, Carl's forehead pressed to Harold's collarbone, shudders racking them both, not just from cold. "I thought I was done," Carl whispered, voice muffled against the wet flannel. "Called you a freak." "God, Harold, I didn't mean." "Save it," Harold cut in, but there was no bite left, only exhaustion. He eased them up the path, supporting Carl's weight, the lighthouse beam sweeping the bay like a forgiving eye. Back at the truck, he cranked the heat, stripping off their drenched layers with numb fingers, wrapping Carl in an old army blanket from the bench seat. The cab filled with the scent of wet wool and brine, a fragile sanctuary amid the dying squall. They drove in silence to Harold's place, a weathered Cape Cod on the edge of town, passed down from his folks, with a porch swing that creaked like old bones. Inside, the fire crackled to life under Harold's coaxing, casting flickering shadows on the knotty pine walls adorned with faded photos. Dad at the helm, Mom laughing over chowder pots. Carl huddled by the hearth, sipping black coffee laced with bourbon, his skin mottled with bruises blooming like storm clouds. "Why'd you come back?" Carl asked finally, eyes fixed on the flames. "After what I said. You could have let the sea take me." Harold sank into the armchair opposite, nursing his own mug, shoulder throbbing but ignored. "Because that's what anchors do. They don't cut loose when the chain rattles." The words hung, heavy as the air before thunder. Carl looked up then, green eyes raw, stripped of the city armor he'd worn like a second skin. "I panicked. Our Trent showing up, it dredged up all the shit I buried. The pressure to be the Whitaker golden boy, Harvard, Wall Street, a wife someday to keep the family name pristine. I fled to Maine thinking I could outrun it, build something real with you. But when he dangled that old life, I saw myself folding, like I always do." Harold leaned forward, elbows on knees, the fire's warmth doing little for the chill in his bones. "Folding's a choice, Carl. Not fate. You think I haven't faced my own storms? Coming out in this town. Hell, my uncle still crosses the street when he sees me. Lost a deckhand once who called me an abomination and quit mid-season. But I chose you. Every damn morning, hauling ass at dawn, coming home to your sketches and your laugh. That's not folding. That's fighting." Tears tracked down Carl's face, carving clean paths through the grime. He slid to the floor, crawling the space between them to kneel at Harold's feet, hands tentative on his thighs. "I love you. Not the idea of you, or the escape you represent. You, the man who smells like salt and engine oil, who sings off-key to Springsteen in the shower. I was a coward tonight, but I'm done running." Harold's hand found Carl's hair, threading gently, the touch a bridge over the chasm they'd nearly tumbled into. "Love's not a straight line, buddy. It's this messy, bruising, full of squalls. But if you're in, you're all in." They made love that night on the rug by the fire, slow and reverent, bodies rediscovering each other like survivors after a shipwreck. No frantic urgency, just the quiet affirmation of skin on skin, breaths sinking with the embers pop. Carl traced the compass tattoo with lips and tongue, murmuring apologies into Harold's flesh. Harold held him close, whispering back promises forged in the night's forge. Mornings on the water, evenings carving dreams from wood and wave. Dawn broke gray and grudging, the storm's remnants dripping from the eaves. Over eggs and toast, they planned, practical as Mainers must be. Carl would ghost Trent for good, block the number, burn the bridge. Harold would talk to his crew about bringing Carl on full-time, teaching him the trade beyond tourist jaunts. "We'll make it a double haul," Harold joked, clinking forks. "You and me against the tide. But peace, like calm seas, is fleeting." November rolled in with shorter days and whispers on the wind. The town buzzed with the annual lobster festival prep, booths for taffy pulls, live music under strung lights, the blessing of the fleet at dawn. Harold threw himself into it, organizing the trap-tying contest, his easy grin masking the bruise on his heart. Carl dove into his craft, unveiling a line of engraved paddles that caught the eye of a Portland gallery owner. For a week, felt solid, their love a bulwark against the creeping winter. Then the letter came. It arrived midweek, tucked into Carl's market stall mail, crisp envelope from a Boston firm, embossed with Trent's company's seal. Harold was restocking bait when Carl tore it open, face draining of color. "It's a settlement," he said, voice hollow. "For the startup I co-founded with him. Equity shares I forgot about. 6 figures. Harold paused, gut twisting. "That's good, right? Windfall. We could fix the boat's engine. Maybe put a down payment on that fixer-upper by the cove." Carl folded the check back in, eyes distant. "Yeah. Good." But the seed of doubt had sprouted overnight, fed by the paper's promise of escape velocity. That evening, as they walked the bluff trail, now cleared of debris, the sea a sullen mirror, Carl broached it haltingly. "What if we took a trip, just us? Head south, see the Keys or something. Celebrate." Harold squeezed his hand, wind tugging at their jackets. "Sounds like heaven. But festivals in 2 weeks. Can't bail on the crew." "Not forever," Carl pressed, stopping to face him, the lighthouse silhouetted against the bruised sky. "Just thinking bigger. You, me, a fresh start somewhere the winters don't bite so hard." The words landed like a cold front. Harold searched his face, seeing the flicker, the same wild-eyed hunger from that first night, now laced with something sharper. "Bigger how? You talking leaving Maine? Our life here?" Carl looked away, toward the horizon where storms brewed eternal. "Not leaving. Expanding." Trent mentioned opportunities, consulting gigs, networks. "We could build something real, not just scrape by on lobster and lumber scraps." Harold's laugh was bitter, whipped away by the breeze. "There it is. The ghost again. You think money fixes the hiding? I scrape by because it's honest, Carl. Salt in my veins, calluses on my soul. That's who I am." "It's not about fixing you," Carl snapped, frustration cracking through. "It's about not settling. You deserve more than this backwater grind, nights wondering if the next haul pays the light bill. And you deserve more than a man who won't chase your city dreams?" Harold shot back, voice rising. The argument reignited old embers, words escalating from whispers to shouts, echoing off the rocks. Carl accused Harold of small-mindedness, of anchoring him to a sinking ship. Harold hurled back charges of fickleness, of loving the romance but fleeing the reality. In the heat, Carl pulled the check from his pocket, waving it like a white flag gone rogue. "This could be our ticket out. Or are you too scared to try?" Harold's vision blurred with fury. "Scared? I'm terrified every day, of losing you to this shit, to the lie that more cash means more love." He turned on his heel, stalking back to the truck. "Figure your shit out. But don't drag me into your storm if you're just gonna bail again." Carl didn't follow. The next morning, Harold woke to an empty bed, Carl's truck gone, a note on the kitchen table. "Need space to think. Back soon. Love. C." Soon stretched to days, then a week. Calls went unanswered, texts blooming blue into voids. The festival dawned under a merciful sun, the harbor alive with banners and brass bands. Harold manned his booth, forcing smiles for the tourists, gut churning like chum. Whispers slithered through the crowd, sightings of Carl's truck headed south on Route 1, toward the bridge to Boston. By nightfall, as fireworks burst over the bay, Harold slipped away to the marina, boarding his skiff alone. The water lapped gentle now, mocking his turmoil. He cast off, motoring into the dark, letting the engine's thrum drown the ache. Out where the buoys bobbed like forgotten promises, he cut the motor, lying back to watch the stars pierce the velvet sky. That's when the first fat drops fell. The sky cracked open without mercy, rain sheeting down in biblical sheets, turning the bay into a cauldron of whitecaps. Harold's skiff bucked like a wild colt, the outboard sputtering against the sudden swell. He'd meant to ride out the melancholy, let the sea's rhythm soothe the raw edges Carl had left. But this nor'easter had snuck up like a thief. Warnings be damned, radios ashore. But out here, it was just you and the deep's indifference. Shit, Harold muttered, yanking the tiller, fighting to keep her bow to the waves. The storm was a beast unleashed, winds howling dirges from the northeast, whipping spray that stung like needles. He scanned the horizon for the harbor lights, but visibility was nil, black water merging with black sky, lightning etching veins of fire. Panic, that old shipmate, clawed up his throat. The skiff wasn't built for this. A fair-weather runabout, not his dad's old workhorse moored safe at the dock. A rogue gust slammed broadside, heeling the boat hard. Water flooded the cockpit, icy fingers soaking his jeans. Harold bailed furiously with a bailer bucket, cursing the gods of wind and wave. Not tonight, you bastards. Not like this. Memories flashed. Dad's face in the wheelhouse, calm as glass amid the 98 gale, right before the rogue wave claimed him. Harold wasn't going out the same way. No, sir. But the sea has its own counsel. Another wave crested, green and hungry, crashing over the gunwale. The skiff swamped, engine choking on the surge. Harold lunged for the oars, but they skittered useless from his grasp, swallowed by the froth. Cold clamped his bones, the downpour blinding. He spotted a buoy line in the flash, his own trap markers, glowing faint orange. With a desperate lunge, he snagged it, wrapping it around his wrist like a rosary. The line held, taut as piano wire, hauling him through the chop toward the floating pot. He clambered atop it, a precarious throne of cork and wire, waves slapping his boots. Drenched, shivering, he huddled low, the storm's roar a cacophony in his ears. Carl's note burned in his pocket, sodden but legible. Love, see. Love, a word as slippery as kelp, promising warmth but delivering this deluge. Hours blurred, or maybe minutes, time dilates in the maw. Harold's mind wandered to warmer currents. Carl's laugh echoing in the shed, the way his fingers danced over wood shavings, coaxing beauty from rough grain. Their first real fight, over nothing, a burnt pot roast, ending in makeup sex that shook the rafters. The quiet mornings, coffee mugs steaming on the porch, planning a life stitched from dreams and driftwood. Was it all just chaff in the wind? A distant rumble of thunder, fainter now, heralded the Coast Guard's horn. Searchlights swept the bay like accusatory fingers, voices booming over bullhorns. Any souls out there? Sound off. Harold cupped hands to mouth, bellowing till his throat shredded. A beam pinned him, the cutter slicing through the waves like a scalpel. Ropes tossed, hands hauling, he was aboard, wrapped in mylar blankets, gulping coffee from a thermos that tasted like salvation. Name's Jenkins, he rasped to the mustachioed coxswain, a grizzled vet named O'Malley. Harold Jenkins. Got swamped on my way back from. Thinking. O'Malley clapped his shoulder, ice kind under the brim. We got a call in from shore. Fellow named Whitaker, frantic, said you might have headed out. Radioed every inlet from here to Bar Harbor. Harold's heart stuttered. Carl. back from wherever the devil he'd vanished to, raising the alarm. The cutter churned toward the marina, diesel fumes mingling with brine, and there, on the rain-slick pier under floodlights, stood Carl, jacket zipped to his chin, hair plastered like a drowned pup, face a map of anguish. The moment Harold's boots hit the dock, Carl lunged, crushing him in a bear hug that squeezed the breath from both. Jesus, I thought when the alerts hit, and you weren't answering. His voice cracked, muffled against Harold's neck, body trembling not from cold. Harold stiffened at first, the betrayal sting fresh as road rash, but exhaustion won. He sagged into the embrace, inhaling the familiar scent of sawdust and soap beneath the wet. "Where the hell you been, cowboy?" Note said soon. "That your idea of prompt?" Carl pulled back, eyes red-rimmed, hands framing Harold's face like it was porcelain. "Boston. Went to end it clean. Faced Trent, tore up the check, told him to shove his opportunities up his Ivy League ass. Came back yesterday, but you were at the festival, and I chickened out on the crowd. Then the storm sirens wailed, and I knew. Checked the marina, saw your skiff gone. Called every contact I had. The crew dispersed with claps on backs and gruff stay dries, leaving them alone under the sodium glow. Harold led the way to his truck, Carl shadowing like a penitent. The drive home was thick with unsaid, wipers thwacking a metronome to their silence. At the house, fire roaring once more, they stripped down methodically, no seduction, just survival. Hot showers steamed the bathroom, emerging to towels and cocoa spiked with rum. Seated cross-legged on the couch, knees touching, Carl spilled the full gale. Trent hadn't taken no for an answer. Ambushed him at a Back Bay cafe, all charm and coercion, dangling not just cash but a narrative. "Come home, Carl. This main fling's a phase. We both know you're meant for more." The words had wormed in, stirring old insecurities, the Catholic guilt drilled by his the fear of becoming the family pariah. "I drove back hating myself," Carl admitted, staring into his mug. "Saw the festival lights from the bluff, heard the music, imagined you laughing with the crew. Realized that's the life I want. Messy, real, with you. Not some sterile penthouse echo chamber." Harold listened, the fire's crackle underscoring the weight. Part of him wanted to lash out, demand oaths sworn on buoys and stars. But the larger part, tempered by the sea's lessons, saw the truth. Love wasn't a harbor, safe and still. It was the open water, full of squalls and sudden sun. "You scared the shit out of me," he said finally, voice low. "Not just tonight. That note. Felt like you were already gone." Carl set his mug aside, crawling into Harold's lap, arms looping his neck. "I'm here. All in. No more ghosts." Their kiss was salt-tinged and fierce, a sealing of pacts unspoken. They tumbled to the rug, rediscovering rhythms honed by months of hunger. Slow builds to crashing crescendos, bodies a bulwark against the night's chill. Winter settled like a down comforter, fluffy snow blanketing the bluffs, turning the bay to glass. They fell into a deeper groove, Carl apprenticing on the boat, learning knots and tides with a zeal that bordered on obsession. Harold experimenting with Carl's tools, carving crude decoys that made them both howl with laughter. Holidays brought Carl's folks up from Quincy, wary at first, the dad a burly plumber with a suspicious squint, the mom all floral scarves and probing questions. But over lobster rolls and hearthside yarns, walls thawed. He's good for you, lad. The old man grunted one night, clapping Harold's shoulder. Keeps that city shine from dulling. Spring unfurled green and greedy, the traps filling with claw-waving bounty. They bought the Cove Cottage, a sagging Victorian with ocean views and a workshop begging for Carl's touch. Renovations became their love language. Weekends wielding hammers, evenings collapsing into sawdust-scented exhaustion, making love on drop-cloths under the eaves. Yet shadows lingered, subtle as undertows. Carl's phone still buzzed occasionally, Trent's persistence a low hum, emails deleted unread. Harold caught him staring at the horizon sometimes, that faraway glint in his eye. "Penny for your thoughts?" he'd tease, pulling him close. "Just plotting our empire," Carl would quip, but the ease felt forced, like a line mended too quick. June brought the solstice, bonfires on the beach, locals gathering for storytelling and esmores. Harold and Carl hosted, their fire the biggest, ringed by faces familiar and new. Laughter flowed freer than the ale, tales of gales and ghost ships weaving the night. Under the smoke-hazed stars, Carl leaned into Harold's side, whispering, "This is it. Our storm's eye." Harold kissed his temple, believing it. But belief, like buoys, can drift. The fracture came swift as a summer squall, mid-July 4th weekend. Tourists clogged the roads, fireworks prepped for the Bay Show. Harold was prepping the boat for a charter when Carl's truck roared up, brakes squealing. He spilled out, face ashen, waving a manila envelope like a grenade. "Trent's suing," Carl said, voice pitched high with disbelief. "For breach, says I stole IP from the startup, sabotaged it when I left. Wants everything, the settlement, damages, my name dragged through the courts." Harold's gut plummeted. "On what grounds? You walked clean." Carl paced the drive, gravel crunching. "Revenge. I told him off hard, called him out on the manipulation, the gaslighting. He must have dug, twisted old emails. This Boston v. Maine. They'll bury me in legal fees before the gavel drops." The world tilted, the summer sun suddenly oppressive. Harold pulled him into the shade of the bait shed, hands firm on shoulders. "We'll fight. Get a lawyer, there's firms in Portland that handle this shit. You're not alone." But Carl's eyes were wild, that old panic surfacing. "Fight how? I'm no match for his machine suits, connections, the works. One call to my folks, and it's over. Disowned, blacklisted. I can't. What if we just pay him off, take the hit, start fresh somewhere else?" The words landed like a gut punch. Somewhere else? Again, we just built this, the cottage, the life. You're talking running, Carl. From him, from us. It's not running. It's surviving. Carl exploded, shoving away. "You don't get it. This town's your blood. It's all you've known. But me, I came here to escape, and now the past is clawing back. If I lose everything, what's left? You, me, that's left," Harold said, voice cracking. "Or has that faded too?" The silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. Carl deflated, shoulders slumping. "I don't know anymore. I need time." He drove off then, southbound, tailpipe smoke curling like a question mark. Harold stood rooted, the charter party's arrival a distant buzz. That night, alone in the half-finished cottage, he cracked a beer on the porch, watching fireworks bloom over the bay, bursts of red, white, blue. mocking his solitude. Days bled into a week, Carl's absence a hollow ache. Harold threw himself into work, hauling doubles, avoiding the pitying glances at the co-op. Whispers flew. Whitaker's back in the city, lawyering up. He ignored them, focusing on the rhythm of pots and pulls. But the sea, that old confessor, mirrored his unrest, choppy, unforgiving. Then, the call came at midnight, cell buzzing like a hornet. Carl's voice, frantic over static. Har? Is bad. Trent, he's escalating. Showed up at my folks, spinning lies. Threw him out, but Ma's hysterical. And I slipped. Told him about us to shut him up. Now it's everywhere. Texts, voicemails. He's threatening to out me to the whole network unless I settle. Harold bolted upright, heart hammering. Where are you? A motel off 95. Heading back, but the storm, another one's brewing. NORAD says it's a doozy. Stay put. I'll come get you. No, too dangerous. Just talk to me. Keep me from losing it. They talked through the night, voices threading the wire like lifelines. Memories of bonfires and first touches, dreams of a workshop by the cove. Kids maybe adopted, raising them on tales of resilient waves. Carl's sobs ebbed to sniffles, resolve hardening. I'm coming home. To you. Screw Trent. We'll face it together. Dawn painted the sky peach as Harold paced the kitchen, coffee going cold. The radio crackled warnings. Gale force winds, flooded roads. By noon, reports trickled in, downed lines south of Portland, accidents piling up. Carl's text stopped at 10:47 a.m. Traffic's hell. Almost there. Love you. Then nothing. The silence stretched like a taut hawser, each tick of the clock a hammer blow. Harold's truck ate the miles to the interstate pull-off, wipers battling a drizzle that presaged the monster brewing offshore. He'd called the state troopers, the motels, nothing but dead ends, and we'll look into it. Carl's last ping placed him near Brunswick, snarled in a pileup from the leading edge of the front. Harold's mind reeled with worst cases. Flipped rig, washed out bridge, Carl pinned in wreckage. Come on, you bastard. He growled at the dash, radio scanning for updates. Static. Then a dispatcher's voice, coastal advisory. Evacuations underway from York to Camden. High surf. Storm surge up to 10 feet. The sky darkened to slate. Winds buffeting the ford like a bully's shove. Harold gripped the wheel white-knuckled, replaying their midnight call, the vulnerability in Carl's voice, the fierce I love you that felt like a vow renewed. He reached the crash site by late afternoon, a snarl of mangled metal and flashing blues under sheeting rain. Detours funneled him to a command post in a high school gym, cots and coffee for the displaced. Harold badged his way in with a lobsterman's bluff, scanning faces lit by fluorescence. No Carl. A trooper, rain poncho dripping, shook her head. We've accounted for most vehicles. One pickup's still missing, blonde guy, green Ford, described you as his emergency contact. Harold's blood iced. That's him. Where's the search? Coast Guard's on it. Last sighting. He veered off route toward the old coastal trail. Folks say he was chasing a shortcut to beat the surge. She pointed to a map pinned on foam board, red X marking the spot. A notorious stretch of bluff road, crumbling from erosion, hugging cliffs that plunged to jagged reefs. The realization hit like a rogue wave. Carl, impulsive in panic, gambling on back roads to outrun the storm, the same foolhardy streak that had drawn Harold in, now a noose. "I'm going," Harold declared, turning for the door. "Sir, the suicide out there wins at 70. Visibility zip." He didn't hear her, already gunning the engine into the maelstrom. The bluff road was a nightmare ribbon, potholes pooling like bomb craters, trees bowing low as supplicants. Harold downshifted, crawling at 20, high beams futile against the onslaught. Lightning forked, illuminating wreckage, Carl's truck, nose first into a ditch, rear wheels spinning useless in mud. Harold skidded to a halt, leaping out into the gale, boots sinking ankle deep. "Carl!" The wind stole his shout, but he pressed on, wrenching the driver's door against the suck of vacuum. Empty. Seatbelt dangling, keys in the ignition, phone wedged in the console, dead battery, screen spiderwebbed. A trail of boot prints, half erased by rain, led toward the cliff edge. Harold followed, heart a thunder in his chest, flashlight beam dancing over slick granite. The drop yawned black, waves booming like artillery below, foam glowing phosphorescent in the flashes. 50 yards out, a flicker, Carl's jacket, caught on a wind-whipped shrub, the man himself a crumpled shadow against the brink, one arm outstretched as if beckoning the abyss. "Carl, goddamn it, hold on," Harold bellowed, scrambling the final yards, sliding the last 10 on his belly to avoid the edge. He reached, fingers brushing Carl's sleeve, cold, clammy, but pulsing with faint life. Carl stirred, head lolling, lips moving in a whisper lost to the roar. Close, the damage revealed, gash above the eye, caked with blood and dirt, leg twisted at an ugly angle, likely from the crash, breaths shallow, labored. Har. Tried to. Beat it, Carl slurred, eyes fluttering open, pupils blown wide. Slid off the road. Couldn't. Phone died. Shoo. Easy now. "I've got you." Harold assessed quick concussion, possible break, hypothermia setting in. The storm raged unabated, rain lashing horizontal, cliff eroding in audible crumbles. No waiting for rescue. The surge was climbing, road likely flooding behind them. He stripped his belt, looping it through Carl's, fashioning a crude harness. "On 3, we move. Lean on me, left leg if you can." Carl nodded weakly, pain etching his features. "Sorry. Again. Always. Dragging you into. Save the breath for cursing the weather." Harold hefted him, fire lancing his own shoulder from the old injury. But adrenaline was a cruel mistress, numbing all but the drive. They inched back, inchworm slow, Harold's free hand probing for handholds, roots, rocks, anything to anchor. A gust hit midway, slamming them sideways, Carl's weight yanking Harold perilously close to the lip. Gravel skittered into the void, a mocking patter over the surf snarl. "Can't. Hold," Carl gasped, grip slackening. "You will," Harold snarled, locking eyes green on oak, desperation forging steel. "Think of the cottage, our fire, that godawful decoy I carved. We're not done. You hear? Not by a long shot." Memories fueled them. Carl's first pot haul, grinning ear to ear with slime-smeared cheeks. The solstice bonfire, bodies entwined under stars. The midnight call, voices bridging the miles. Inch by torturous inch, they gained the flat, collapsing behind a boulder as thunder applauded. Harold radioed from the truck's CB. Miracle, it worked, summoning the angels in yellow slicks. The helo arrived at dusk, rotors thwacking like a heartbeat, winching them into the belly of the beast. Medics swarmed, IVs and oxygen, Carl stabilizing under the whir. Harold rode shotgun, hand clasped over the gurney, whispering nonsense about chowder waiting at home. The ER in Portland was a whirlwind, stitches, scans, morphine dreams. Fractured tibia, mild TBI, but no internal bleeds. Clean slate, the doc said, winking. Tough stock, you Mainers. In the dim ward, post-op, Carl woke to Harold dozing in the vinyl chair, calloused hand engulfing his. My hero, he murmured, voice sandpaper rough. Harold stirred, rubbing stubble. Nah. Just your anchor. Told you, don't cut loose. Tears welled. Billing free. I almost did. Trent's poison. Creeps. But you pull me back every time. How? Because love's not fair weather, Carl. Is this the pull, the fight, the holding on when the world's unraveling? He leaned in, foreheads touching, breaths mingling. But no more close calls. We face the bastards together, lawyers, storms, all of it. Carl nodded, fingers tracing Harold's knuckles. Together, summer waned in a haze of rehab and resolve. Carl's leg in a boot, crutches clicking like castanets through the cottage renos. They hired a pitbull attorney from Augusta, ex-prosecutor with a grudge against corporate weasels. Discovery unearthed Trent's house of cards. Fabricated claims. Dr. Docs. A vendetta born of bruised ego. Depositions flew. Carl's testimony a quiet thunder, outing the manipulations without flinching. The town rallied. Crews chipping in for fees. The VFW hosting a Save Our Carver bake sale that netted thousands. Fall painted the bluffs gold again. The case settling out of court. Trent's payout reversed, plus hush money and a gag order. No victory parade, but quiet vindication, Carl burning the settlement check in their fire pit, ashes scattering on the wind. To new currents, he toasted, clinking beer bottles with Harold. Yet the scars lingered, invisible but felt. Carl woke some nights, sweating from dreams of cliffs and lawsuits. Harold checked the weather app obsessively, flinching at low-pressure fronts. They talked it out over porch swings, weaving vulnerability into strength. Therapy sessions in Portland, books on queer resilience stacked by the bed. Love deepened, tempered like steel in the forge. More laughter, fiercer touches, plans etched in pencil but held in iron. Winter's first snow fell on Thanksgiving, blanketing the cove in hush. Carl's folks came again, this time with recipes and no side-eye, the dad even helping haul the tree. As they decorated, lights twinkling on boughs, ornaments of carved anchors and stars, Harold caught Carl's eye across the room. That green gaze steady. Sure. Merry almost Christmas, Carl said later, tangled in sheets, snow tapping the window like Morse code. Harold pulled him closer, heart full as the bay at high tide. Merry everything, but the sea whispers of change, and storms never truly sleep. Spring erupted in riotous color, the bay alive with returning ospreys and the hum of charter boats. The cottage stood proud now, fresh paint like sea foam, workshop humming with Carl's lathe, shelves groaning under commissions from as far as Nantucket. Harold's hulls hit record yields. The Daphne II, named for Dad's lost vessel, cutting wakes like a bride's veil. They marked anniversaries small and grand. A year since the first clambake kiss with a beach picnic, sunset toasts to survival. Yet beneath the bloom, fissures spiderwebbed. Carl's restlessness surfaced in subtle ways. Sketches of urban lofts amid the nautical motifs. Late-night scrolls through job boards, just browsing. Harold noticed, said nothing at first, trusting the tide to turn. But trust, like rope, frays under strain. The breaking point crested in May, under a sky too blue for betrayal. Harold returned from a dawn run, traps heavy with shedders, to find Carl on the porch, laptop open, face lit by the glow of a video call. Trent's polished mug filled the screen, older, harder edged, but that same serpentine smile. And with your talent, Carl, we could redefine the brand. Equity stake, corner office overlooking the harbor. Not this mudflat, but real water, the Charles. Harold froze in the doorway, salt-crusted and gutted. Carl startled, slamming the lid, but the damage was done, words out, poison inhaled. Har, it's not what. Save it. Harold's voice was ice over gravel, dropping his cooler with a thud. How long this time? Weeks? Months of browsing before the note. Carl stood, hands placating. 2 calls. Recon only. He's pivoting the company to artisanal tech, apps for craftsmen. Mentioned my work. That's all. I was gonna tell you. Liar. The word escaped, sharp as a gaff hook. Harold paced the porch, wind chimes tinkling mockery. You've been itching since the settlement. Eyes on the horizon, fingers twitching for the key. Thought we'd forged something here, but it's just another phase for you. Huh? City boy slumming it till the itch strikes. Carl's face crumpled, but anger flared back. That's not fair. I've poured everything into this. Leg still aches on rainy days. Nightmares of that cliff. Fought for us. Outed myself to my blood. The town. But yeah, I get restless. This life. It's beautiful, but small. You ever think bigger? A gallery in Boston. Your carvings shipped nationwide? Or are we doomed to traps and tourists forever? Harold halted, breath ragged. Small? This is roots. Carl, depth, not breadth. I've chased bigger. Sold the boat once for a Boston gig, hauling freight. Lasted 6 months before the concrete choked me. Came home to the smell of salt, the feel of lines in my hands. That's not small. It's soul. You want empire? Go. But don't pretend it's for us. The argument crested, waves of words crashing. Carl accusing stagnation, Harold betrayal's echo. In the fury, truths spilled, Carl's fear of fading into obscurity, Harold's terror of abandonment's repeat. Carl grabbed his keys, storming to the truck. Maybe I need to see if the grass is greener. Again. Go then, Harold shouted, voice breaking. But this time, don't come crawling back when the city's concrete cuts. The truck peeled out, gravel spraying like shrapnel. Harold sank to the steps, head in hands, the bay's lap a dirge. Hours later, he packed a duffel essentials, no frills, and boarded the Daphne 2, motoring into twilight. The sea called, vast and unjudging. He'd ride it out, let the rhythm mend what words couldn't. But Carl didn't go far. Halfway to the bridge, the sky darkened, another nor'easter barreling unannounced, freak cell, meteorologists later said, born of clashing fronts. Rain lashed, roads flooded. Carl's truck hydroplaned on a curve, slamming guardrail, teetering on the brink of a swollen creek. He scrambled out, pulse thundering, as the world dissolved into torrent. In the chaos, instinct turned him back, toward the one constant, the anchor. He flagged a ride on a passing rig, hunkered in the cab as winds howled hymns of regret. Dawn found him at the cottage, pounding the door, soaked and shaking. Empty. Panic clawed. He hit the marina, finding the slip bare, neighbors murmuring of Harold's solo sail into the brewing blow. No, no. Carl sprinted to his own skiff, a sleek daysailor he'd built from scrap, casting off into the gray. The bay was a witch's brew, waves steep as houses, but he pushed her hard, spray sheeting the cockpit. Harold, damn you! Wait! His shouts fed the gale, but love's pull was stronger. Miles out, he spotted her, the Daphne's silhouette pitching against the horizon, deck awash. Harold at the helm, lashed to the wheel, fighting the wheelhouse's shudder. Carl gunned the throttle, closing the gap in a suicide run, lines flying from his bow. They collided in a crunch of fiberglass, but held ropes knotted in frenzy, bodies bridging the decks as waves battered. You idiot! Harold roared over the din, hauling Carl aboard, grip bruising. What the hell? Same as you, chasing storms. Carl clung, breathless, the sea's fury mirroring their own. I can't go. Not without you. The city's a mirage. This us is real. Flawed, fierce, but home. Harold's resolve cracked, arms crushing him close amid the spray. Then stay. Fight the itch with me. We build bigger here, your gallery, my charters. Together, the storm peaked then, a leviathan wave rearing to swallow them whole. Harold spun the wheel, Carl bracing the rail, their hands locked in defiance. The crest broke over, green thunder, but the Daphne plunged through, emerging scarred but seaworthy. As the winds flagged, they furled sails, motoring home under clearing skies, rainbows arcing like benedictions. Back on shore, bruised and buoyant, they rebuilt, not with grand gestures, but quiet men's, therapy renewed, dreams journaled side by side, a joint booth at the festival showcasing wood and wire wonders. Carl's restlessness channeled into ventures, a podcast on queer crafts, online sales spiking. Harold learned to dream beyond the bay, co-designing eco-traps with Carl's tech savvy. Years wove them tighter, a commitment ceremony on the bluff, rings of knotted rope under the lighthouse beam, town turning out with cheers and clams. Adopted twins came later, foster boys from the system, wide-eyed at the sea, learning lines and love in equal measure. Storms still came, tempests of teen rebellion and midlife drifts, but they weathered them anchored, talks over chowder, touches in the night. The compass rose tattoo now echoed on Carl's chest. In the end, love proved no storm to chase, but the calm eye within turbulent, tender, eternal. Harold and Carl, two souls lashed against the gales, found not perfection, but profundity in the pull of hands, the crash of waves, the unyielding hold of home.